Hello and welcome to Junkyard Studios. I saw online today that some people were requesting how to recap their Echoplex, and I just recently had to do it for the same reasons. My Echoplex, I had no volume, the echo was gone, it wasn't working as it should, and I thought, oh no, it's done for, but it wasn't. It was just the the white Mallory caps that are in the unit. When these units were released, those caps were probably top of the line or close to it, and they were really good caps back in the day, but it's about 30 or 40 years now, and they're not what they used to be, and it's time to replace them. In my unit, once I replaced those, everything came back. When I originally got this unit, I had to replace the tape, of course, and do a little bit of maintenance. That wasn't too bad. Worked beautifully. I think about 3 or 4 months ago, it stopped working pretty much. You could hear it. It didn't have any volume. It didn't have any echo. So to kind of show off what I got here, you can see that it's working, and I'm telling the truth. Sounds beautiful, at least to me. So I will open this up here and show you what I did. Unfortunately, all the work is finished. I can't take you with me as I recap the unit, but it's not that bad. I think I recapped part of the power section for the motors. I didn't notice any difference. I don't think I had to. That may or may not be the case for you. I would think that if the power section that involves the motor operation was starting to fail, you would have like tape travel issues and things of that nature. I just did it because I took it apart and I was in there and I just wanted a fresh start. Some people have asked what kind of capacitors to use. That's kind of a touchy subject with certain people. I don't have any brand favoritism per se. I just try to get whatever works and whatever's close to the value that I need. But if you were afraid of some of the cheaper brands, I've used them. Some of them are good. If you were afraid of going, to some of the knockoff brands of the cheaper stuff, you could always do all Nichicon, and that'll probably be just fine. It'll be a little pricey, but every Nichicon cap I've installed, I've never had an issue with. It's always been quality on my end. I have no complaints. If I'm ever worried about it, I just buy all Nichicon, and it works out. So we'll start taking this apart, and I'll show you what caps I replaced. Where I replaced them, I don't think I replaced all of them. I had intended on doing it, but when I put it back together and it started working, I just kind of forgot about it. I figured that cap was still good. I could do some measurements to find out. I'm a little better at that now. Basically, from my understanding, if that cap is passing DC into the signal, it is leaking and no longer functioning the way it should. Correct me if I'm wrong. What I usually do is when I see a problem, especially with a unit of this vintage, I usually just wipe all the electrolytics anyway. You're already in there, you got it apart, you don't want to replace 2 of them, put it back together, have fun for 2 months, and then have another one go bad, and just have to take it all apart and do it again, is the way I look at it. So when I'm in there, I just replace all of them. I believe this unit is an ep3. And the very first thing I did, which I would suggest you also do if you're buying used, I purchased a rewound tape cartridge from this company. I believe they are still around and still doing reloads. They also make this very nice metal case for their reloads. You can also send this back to them when you need another tape wound in. It was fairly inexpensive when I purchased it. I think it was around $50 to $60 for the whole thing. And it was definitely necessary. The tape that was in there was pretty well destroyed. So I did save the Mallory caps from the Echoplex that I replaced. I replaced 3 1UF 50 volts and 3 100 UF 15 volts. It confused me because this outer casing is plastic, as you can see. So I thought they were plastic capacitors. They're not, they're electrolytic. I'm going to cut one open to see what's inside because I was wondering that myself. Another confusing thing is these say MF instead of UF. From everything that I can gather, it's microfarads, it's still UF. The values are the same. You can just look for UF capacitors. Why over the history of capacitors they changed their markings so much, I couldn't tell you, but if you get 100 UF and 15 volt and 1 UF 50 volt, those will work just fine. There are 2 different ways to get at the internals of your Echoplex. From what I can tell, one of the ways, and probably my favorite way, is to flip the entire unit over. I first start by taking this adjustment knob off of its position so that it doesn't put undue stress on the mechanism that's underneath this plate, because everything under here is your tape mechanism and your tape. I like to keep this plate on to minimize damage. Usually I'll also put like a pillow or a folded blanket of some sort underneath it, as well as an added layer of protection. For this video, I'm not going to do that. So after that is completed, we flip the unit over and we find the 4 screws underneath. We've already removed the screw on this side here. After we remove that, we can lift the wooden case completely off and get at the internals. Alternatively, there is another way. If you're not comfortable with that, you may flip the unit on its side, like so. Get at your 4 attachment screws and the side, holding onto the mechanism. Just for safety's sake, I don't think that it will fall out if you remove all the screws, but I hold on to it anyway, and then I gently pull the chassis from this side outward. Either of those, whichever you're more comfortable with, will work to get at the internals of the Echoplex. Inside the Echoplex we have 3 capacitors here on the power board that are 500 UF at 50 volt, and then a 4th capacitor down here on this barrier strip. That capacitor is 500 UF at 50 volts, so you will need 4 500 UF at 50 volt capacitors for the power section, if in fact you're having any trouble with that. I personally didn't. I just replaced it for good measure. Here are the boards of which I replaced my capacitors on. There was nothing here to replace, So I didn't really touch any of those. The two boards that I focused on were these. One of them is held on by regular machine screws and nuts over on this side, and then these plastic standoffs, which you just kind of pinch. Be careful because they break very easily. You just kind of pinch enough to lift the board out of place, and then you can do your desoldering on the back side. I did not replace this capacitor or that capacitor. Those are both 35 UF at 25 volt. I didn't replace them because I didn't have them on hand, and I haven't noticed a problem. That may not be the case with your unit, so plan accordingly. This board is the same. You just kind of pinch those little standoffs, gently work the board out, and you should be able to get enough room to be able to desolder the back of them. If you don't have enough room, you're going to have to mark and remember where each of these cables goes and desolder them from the board enough to lift it to get underneath there. But I don't remember desoldering anything to get underneath there. I just kind of gently pushed my way in there, and I don't think I used the bulb for this one because it's kind of tight quarters. I just used the pencil soldering iron and got under there and heated one side enough to pull it back and get that leg out of the board, because these are one-sided PCBs, and then I did the same on the other leg to pull it out. If you're going to do it that way, I suggest that you very carefully make sure that the leg is heated enough where this moves without a whole lot of pressure, because you could damage the PCB. Again, if that method scares you, don't do it. Use the bulb and desolder points from the board so you can lift it out and have enough room to work with. That was just a way that I cheated and got it done without having to desolder a bunch of stuff. What I do when I desolder things to get them out of the way temporarily is I hang a little tape flag off of the conductor that I desolder, and I write on that little tape flag where it went to. And sometimes I'll even mark the board. If there's no marking on that lug, I'll name it. I'll just go around the entire board and name it 1 through 10, whatever's easiest. And then on that tape flag, if it's on 3, I just put lug 3, and so forth, and reattach them in that fashion. It looks like on this recap job I did use Nichicon and Nippon Chemicon, I think, is the name of the brand. Those are two brands that I've used extensively and trust, but I have used other brands that I either have not heard of before or other people haven't told me about with good success. With capacitors, it's kind of difficult to just say one brand is any good. Some of them are, some of them aren't. The really, really cheap stuff tends to have a problem sometimes. I know that Dell monitors had a big issue with that back in the day. I think most of that has cleared by now. I just kind of, I get what I can and measure it before I put it in. If it looks good and it works, I go with it. I haven't really had an issue yet, but I don't go too cheap on the capacitors. I don't think that the monetary value is a direct correlation with their quality. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It's almost completely random. So that's why I suggest if you're concerned about it in any fashion, I would just go with Nichicon. I know that they are of quality, and everyone that I've installed has been good. Over time, after you recap a lot of your own stuff, you'll kind of figure out what brands you like and what to use and what not to use. So then, putting this back together is reverse of the deinstall. Just stick it back in the case, put all 5 screws back in, put the cover back on all of your components in, and you're ready to roll again. It's that simple. When you're putting this chassis back into the wooden case, the only side you really have to worry about is over here. Everything else is contained and won't be snagged on anything. There's not a whole lot to worry about going back into the case. This would be probably the only concern, and it hides behind the panel right here, so it pretty much completely misses everything that it could possibly snag on. Still be careful when you're putting it back into the case, but there's not a whole lot to go wrong there, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Same on this side, everything's kind of tucked in there pretty good. Again, be careful just for good measure. When you're putting this chassis back into the case, again, being very gentle, I would make sure that the back of the chassis goes right up to the wood as best as you can, and just drop it in like that. Now you're ready to, I would start with the side screw first, flip it over again, and then put the bottom screws in after. These are the capacitors that I replaced, that I counted. One UF 50 volt, I had 3 of them. 35 UF 25 volt, I had 2. 100 UF 15 volt, I had 3. And a 500 UF 50 volt, I had 4 of. I would always verify the information I gave you, but that's all that I counted, and that should be accurate. However, disassemble the unit. You're going to have to repair it anyway, and verify, because there's also changes between versions and things of that nature. So this information may only apply to a certain number of ep3s that were run. I know that other units had different boards and different capacitors, so keep that in mind, and always open the unit and verify it, and then order your parts. I opened the plastic capacitors just to verify that they are in fact electrolytic with a very thick plastic case, and there you can see the internal guts of an electrolytic capacitor. Unfortunately, I had to kind of barbarian it. I really wanted a really nice cutaway so we could see it, but these are very, very thick. There's a lot of plastic in there. So it looks like plastic caps. It isn't, and of all the things that I've opened, I've never seen these again. That doesn't mean they don't exist somewhere, they must. It just means that everything that I've worked on, I've never seen these. Hopefully you found something useful in this video, and it makes you decide whether to repair your unit or not. If you decide not to, and you think that this procedure is more difficult than you can handle, there are plenty of repair technicians around the world that would be happy to help you with that. You can pick your favorite one. Sometimes it takes a while to find them. Sometimes it doesn't. For me, it took me a long time, and that's why I do this on my own mostly now. I had to. So like, share, and subscribe if you found this useful, and thanks for watching.